Mazel Tov, everyone, and Shabbat Shalom, everyone. And to all our guests who are joining from near and far, welcome. Parashat Beha'alotecha describes life in a wilderness. The people are physically worn out by the journey, by unprovoked battle attacks from external enemies, by tense factions from within, by infectious disease, and by the harsh climate of the midbar, of the wilderness, day and night. The people are emotionally depleted. They lack confidence in their leaders. They lack confidence in their own endurance. They are spiritually fragile because of their wavering faith in God. And as a result, there is divisiveness. There is rebellion. There is blame gaming, slander, and despair. That is life in a wilderness. And I ask you, does it sound familiar? For 15 months now, we have been wandering in a wilderness of our own. We are physically worn down by the journey of life in lockdown, by unprovoked battle attacks against Israel, by tense factions from within our own societies and communities, by infectious disease called coronavirus, and by the harsh climate of a long winter here in Toronto, which even reappeared yesterday for a few flurries. God help us. We are emotionally depleted by lack of confidence in our leaders, both here and south of the border, and in Israel too. We lack confidence in our own ability to endure it. And we may also be spiritually fragile due to our own wavering faith in God. As a result, there is for us, just as there was for our ancestors in the wilderness, divisiveness, faithlessness, rebellion, blame gaming, slander, and sometimes, yes, moments of despair. So today I ask, from where does our healing come? There are at least 4 sources I'd like to name today. The first is the source of prayer, which I hope has been buoying your spirits even today. When Miriam was struck with infectious disease, her younger brother called out, El na rifanala. Please, O God, heal her, please. It is the shortest and most effective prayer in all of the Hebrew Bible. A little poem, almost a palindrome, El na rifana la. It is bracketed by that one syllable of na, please, the word of beseeching. It is a fear-filled petition. Please, O God, heal her. Please, I beg of you. Prayer is our first source of healing. Even before the science and the medicine kicks in, and thank God for the scientists and the medical professionals, but even before what they can offer as sources of healing reaches us, there is first prayer. When we turn our sorrows into supplication, already the healing process has begun. Whether the sickness necessarily turns into recovery, we do not know. But healing does begin with prayer. That we know. Health and healing are not synonymous. Health and healing are related, but they are not the same thing. I have witnessed many occasions when there is no return to good health, but there is, nevertheless, healing. Moses' prayer prompts them both, health and healing. Miriam is restored to health, and she is healed. So let us take comfort and courage from Moses' example in our parasha. Let us take up the beseeching language of petitionary prayer in this wilderness wandering. And let us begin and end always with the word na, please. Let there be both health and healing in our city, in our country, in our world. The second source of healing, which we see, is care, immediate care, instinctive, spontaneous prayer that comes from loved ones, from those who are nearest to us, from brothers and sisters who lift up their dear ones. And it is a source of healing when that happens for both the giver and the receiver. You've witnessed it, you've experienced it yourselves many times over. The Talmud records the story of Rabbi Eliezer, who fell ill. And Rabbi Yochanan, the great Rabbi Yochanan, went to visit him. He saw that Eliezer's room was dark and there were no windows there. But Rabbi Yochanan's presence lit up the room. And he turned to Eliezer in his sickbed and he asked him, "Are your sufferings welcome to you?" And Rabbi Eliezer replied, "Neither they nor their reward are welcome to me." And so the great Rabbi Yochanan reached out his hand and he said, "Give me yours." And that is how he lifted him up. The super commentators say, this is how it is with those who are in need of healing. Just as a prisoner cannot release himself from prison, neither can the sick release herself or himself from that lowly state. And so we depend on one another to be a source of healing for brothers and for sisters and for those in the innermost circle. Among our brothers and sisters, this week we remember and we mark the 30th anniversary of Operation Solomon. In 1991, Ethiopia had been embroiled in a decades-long civil war and was facing a famine as well, a terrible wilderness. Rebel forces were advancing toward Addis Ababa and the Jews who lived there. Diplomats negotiated a deal with the Ethiopian government, and covert operations were arranged to enable evacuation at a moment's notice. After President George H.W. Bush sent a letter to the new Ethiopian president, an agreement was reached on May 23rd, allowing the Jews to leave Ethiopia all at once. And so there was Operation Solomon, a healing effort, a swift effort for brothers and sisters in the wilderness. It started the very next day after the letter was signed. And immediately after the airlift, Addis Ababa fell into the hands of the rebels. We dare to imagine what would have befallen the 14,310 Jewish souls who were airlifted in a matter of 36 hours. It is still to this date the world's record for the swiftest airlift operation. This is prayer in motion. It is healing in motion. Healing when the world becomes a wilderness. Jew says to fellow Jew, "Give me your hand and let me raise you up." We raise each other up from a place of danger, whether it is the sickbed or the battlefield, or social media, or university campuses. And at this moment of healing, both the giver and the receiver is uplifted by the reunion. Max's grandmother, our dear congregant Wendy Eisen, was such a source of healing in her fight to free Soviet Jewry from behind the Iron Curtain. And now her story is a source of healing for her grandchildren, because they know who they are and they know where they come from and they know to whom they belong as they walk in her footsteps of loving loyalty for the Jewish people everywhere. The third kind of healing is when we care for the other, not just the brother, but for the other, for the one who we might even call a stranger. In the Talmud, there is the expression that when one visits a person who is sick, we take away 1/60th of their pain. And so the rabbis ask, why then not gather 60 people around the sickbed, and then he will be restored entirely to health? No, it doesn't work like that. You see, it's a math problem. It's a question of fractions. First, the first visitor comes and takes away 1/60th of the sick one's pain, and then comes the second visitor who takes away 1/60th of the remaining pain, and the third one comes, and so on and so on. And so you never quite get to zero. But then there's a gloss on the commentary, and a voice interjects to say, no, you really can take away all of the pain, so long as all 60 of those people truly love that person as they love themselves. Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Our Torah demands that we expand the circle of healing beyond our own dear ones, not only for the brothers, but also for the others. And when we do, there is a chance for complete healing. Rabbi Jeffrey Salkin wrote this week in the Jewish press that there was a deafening silence from his Christian colleagues against the backdrop of some of the most terrifying and painful weeks in recent Jewish history. He was waiting for his phone to ring, but it didn't ring. Not when thousands of rockets sent to kill civilians were indiscriminately raining down on Israel, and not when Jews were being attacked in the streets of London, New York City, Montreal, and not when our children and teens were being assaulted with hate-filled lies on their social media feeds, and not when celebrities and mainstream press and entertainment channels were spinning conspiracy theories. Rabbi Salkin reminds us of the famous Hasidic story when the rabbi asks another one, "Do you love me?" And the other says, "Yes, of course I love you." And the rabbi says, "Do you know what causes me pain?" And the other says, "Dear Rabbi, how can I know what causes you pain?" To which the rabbi responds, "If you do not know what causes me pain, then how can you say that you love me?" I learned yesterday of a young man who knows the pain of strangers, of Jewish people he's never met. His name is Mahir. I learned this story from Rabbi Erez Sherman of Los Angeles. He writes, "Today I met a hero. He doesn't call himself a hero. He simply introduced himself to me saying, 'Rabbi, I am a loyal friend. My name is Mahir. I am an Armenian, Lebanese, Christian young man who was simply out for dinner at a sushi restaurant with some friends in Los Angeles last week. What was going to be a quiet night of food and friends turned into a night that I could never have imagined, an anti-Semitic attack on Jews. While others did not know what to do, while others just looked on and said, 'I cannot know your pain,' Mahir stepped up, both protecting his Jewish friends and all the strangers who were there at the sushi fumi. Rabbi Sherman was desperate to meet Mahir and took him for lunch. They embraced one another, and Mahir said, 'I just was there at the right time for the right reason, I guess.' And he told the rabbi about how his Jewish friends invited him to Shabbat dinner, and he was amazed at the scene of all the love in the room. And he said, 'You do this every week?' And in the midst of the conversation with Rabbi Sherman, Mahir announced, 'This July, I'm going to Israel.' The rabbi couldn't believe it and asked for explanation. Mahir said, 'I have been receiving messages of thanks from all over the world, including from Israel. And so I'm excited now to go and see that land and to meet its peoples.' Mahir is a photographer. Many Jews walked right past him at Jewish weddings when they were dancing the hora. They may not have even noticed him standing there behind the camera. But that night at the sushi restaurant, when Jews were attacked simply for being Jews, Mahir was indeed a hero. He put his camera down to protect not his brothers, but the others, because he knew their pain, and he saw in them neighbors, and he knew it was his human duty to love his neighbors as he loves himself. Let us each take inspiration from him. We know what it is to feel the pain of not only brothers, but the others. During this time of pandemic, we felt the pain of people of color, including Jews of color, who are our brothers after all. During and in the aftermath of George Floyd's murder, we felt their pain and we took on their cause, and we used our power to heal. So must we now feel the pain of Indigenous Canadians and show our capacity for empathy, our ability to heal, to be with them as they mourn, when this week it was announced that the remains of 215 Indigenous children, students who were entrusted to the residential school in British Columbia, have now been found using ground-penetrating radar. May God watch over and protect the souls of those children. And so must we show our capacity to feel the pain of Arab citizens of Israel, and also for any innocent Palestinians in the territories. We must treat them as neighbors. We must know their pain and do our best to aid in their healing. This week, I shared the photographs, the very touching photographs of Anat Harel, who is an Israeli tour guide and educator. Across her Facebook page, it now has the slogan, which is plastered throughout many neighborhoods in Israel: Jews and Arabs refuse to be enemies. And the photographs she posted were of Jewish women and Arab women sitting in a circle and just listening to one another, holding one another's pain and offering one another healing. She writes, "We have no other country, and so we will share our living here. There is no other way." The fourth and final source of healing I wish to lift up for us today is healing for the self. First and foremost, get that vaccine as soon as you are eligible. Don't jump the queue, but as soon as you are eligible, go and get that vaccine. It is the greatest shot, no pun intended, at our own health and healing now. And then there is another kind of inoculation. It is an inoculation against a virus called anti-Semitism. This week, I call upon congregants and Jews everywhere, please double down on Jewish life. The best response to someone who fantasizes about a world without Jews is to be Jewish, to do Jewish. The most powerful response to someone who calls for the destruction of Jewish life is to strengthen Jewish life. The most powerful response to someone who dares to fantasize about a world without the state of Israel is to commit yourself to making the state of Israel the good and great nation that we know it must be among the nation of the world. And when we gather like this, simply like this, in our synagogues and on the live streams to reach one another, we replace darkness with light. And when we study Torah together and we draw out its wisdom, we also bring the world to greater healing. When we carry those mitzvot forward into the world, when we join one another in songful prayer, morning and evening, this is an act of revolt to replace hatred with harmony. So as we find ourselves, good people, as we find ourselves now in another kind of midbar, wandering in another kind of wilderness, we look for the helpers, as we were taught as children. and we look for the sources of healing, and we pledge to be sources of healing. We learn this from Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Eliezer, how to reach out for dear ones. Take my hand, let me raise you up. We learn this from Operation Solomon too, how we care for our brothers and sisters in whatever wilderness they may face, whatever danger they may know. We learn this from Mahir in Los Angeles, how to go beyond the brother and see the other, to know the other's pain. We learn this from the circle of Jewish and Arab Israeli women who hold one another and pledge to bring one another to greater understanding and a shared life. And we learn this today from Mitchell and Max about healing for oneself, grabbing hold of Torah, grabbing hold of community, stepping up and introducing oneself to the Jewish people and say, I am yours and you are mine. That is too a great source of healing. And finally, we learn from Moses and Miriam that we must call upon our God, who is the ultimate source of healing, no matter the wilderness we face. And so I conclude with our prayer, Rifa'enu Adonai v'nei Rafeh, heal us, O God, and we shall be healed. Hoshi'enu Adonai v'nei Vashea, save us, O God, and we shall be saved. For you are the source of our healing. You are the one who grants complete healing for all our afflictions. L'chol makotenu. Shabbat shalom, and Ken Yehi Ratzon.